Hi, this is Fern, and I want to welcome anybody who's watching to Astrology Answers. And this is part of the Wise Stars online community. So if you want first dibs on asking a question or a chance to win a free 15-minute live reading at the next Astrology Answers that I do, then please sign up for my newsletter at the link in bio. And if you're already receiving my newsletter, you can get a friend to sign up and DM me their email to enter to win a free reading. So again, next time I do these Instagram lives, I'm going to be doing a free 15-minute online reading to anybody who wins the entering the contest to receive that reading by signing up for my newsletter. So this is a container for the next half hour. I'm going to do an overview of the astrology of the moment for February and where we're at now. And then I'm going to answer a couple of questions. Some of these questions have already been submitted to me when I requested it from my newsletter folks. But if you have a question that comes up that you'd like answered about astrology as I'm talking, please send it to me. And if we have time, I'll be answering that today. Okay, so here goes, the astrology for the month. So the overall theme of the month is stepping into a new reality grounded in the past. So starting with today, when we had the Sun conjunct Saturn, and the moon in Aries is right now moving towards the conjunction with Chiron. And we're also approaching Mars squaring Chiron tomorrow. So all of these transits are pointing us in this direction of what can we learn from any blockages that show up today. So part of what I like to look at when I run into blockages and I know what's happening with the astrology, I ask myself the question, if life were a dream, what would this be telling me? So looking at any blockages that might have come up today, particularly around life lessons that have Aquarius themes, a vision, ingenuity, the future, community. So if anything showed up for you today that feels like it's kind of holding you in place and it wants you to look at it carefully, take a look at what that might be saying to you in terms of Aquarius themes in particular. So we've had a chance over the last 40 days with Venus retrograde and also Mercury retrograde to review the past with two key personal planets going backward. And now that they are direct, and all 10 of the planets are direct until the end of April, there's the beginning of some movement forward. There's an activation and a motivation. But this is slow movement forward because it takes a little time for the planets to pick up to full speed. And so sometimes there can be a feeling of impatience, but I'm really an astrologer who likes to appreciate the reasons for why the planets move in the way that they do. And I like this time where we're kind of in the retro shade phase. I think of it, if you've ever done psychedelics, any kind of psychedelic trip, you have the trip, and that's the retrograde time. And you're kind of in the midst of everything. But the shade phase is the opportunity to integrate that, to take what you learned during that time and figure out what pieces of it have meaning and how you can bring that into your daily life and make it useful to you. So a personal example for you is that for me during the retrograde phase, that took place, Venus and Mercury both retrograde in my 4th house, which is Cancer's house. And this is a place of family and ancestors and the past. And as Venus and Mercury going retrograde through that house, I wasn't really, getting a lot of information. But when Mercury went retrograde yesterday, all of a sudden the downloads started to hit, and it was like stuff is coming through, and I'm learning so much about that fourth house reality. And I was thinking and feeling, I'm appreciating the slow movement forward and the picking up speed, because it gives me a chance to really listen and keep receiving those downloads, so that by the time everything's moving faster, I've got the information I need. So if you know your chart a little bit and you know which house that Venus and Mercury were retrograde in Capricorn, so this would be the sign on your whatever house cusp, you're looking for a Capricorn on that house cusp. And for anybody who doesn't know, astro.com is a great resource for free charts, and you can take a look at your house cusp. But taking a look at where Venus and Mercury were retrograde, which house, and looking at some of the themes around that house for information. So again, for anybody who's new, who's just joined, this is an overview of the astrology for February. And then I'm also answering any astrology questions you have. So I have some that were submitted ahead of time. But if you have a question that comes up while you're watching and you want to ask it, please go ahead and submit it. Okay, so other things that are happening this month. This is a really busy month in the cosmos. So we've got Mercury and Venus in their retro shade, which means they're just kind of coming out of retrograde motion, moving slowly, and that lasts until February 24th for Mercury and March 2nd for Venus, and then they're full speed ahead. And so after that retro shade phase, both of those planets are moving forward at full motion, and that's when the beginning of the real new reality began. Other transits that we're having, other upcoming transits that really stand out for February, there is a Mars-Venus conjunction that happens on February 15th. And this is a really interesting one because it's Mars and Venus in Capricorn, and Venus has just been retrograde for 40 days. So Mars is that planet that activates and builds energy and life force and sets boundaries and helps us claim our territory. Whereas Venus is yes, Mars is no. And so when Mars joins Venus, coming out of her retrograde and kind of reestablishing herself, Mars steps in and begins to lay claim to all of that territory that Venus has established during the retrograde phase. So Venus is starting to understand more about what she values, what she desires, what brings pleasure. And now Mars comes along to defend that and protect it and lay claim and activate it in the world. So taking a look at that time of the month between February 15th and 17th around what you came up with in terms of what you love and desire and enjoy during the retrograde, the Venus retrograde. Now, that's a super interesting time period and we're talking about the period between February 15th and 17th when Mars and Venus are conjuncting Capricorn. On that same day, Mercury moves into Aquarius. So Mercury is in new territory too. So we're having new ideas, illumination, envisioning the future. Aquarius is that sign that's about ingenuity and looking at things from a different perspective. So that comes into play during the Venus-Mars conjunction as well. And then the very next day on the 16th, on February 16th, we have the Leo full moon. So Sun is in Aquarius, Moon is in Leo, Sun and Moon, opposite signs, that's always a full moon. And this is a really dynamic full moon. So this is going to be the first full moon in Aquarius that is not closely touched by that Saturn-Uranus square we had all year. So there's a sense of newness and freedom and really movement forward. And, okay, so what happens next in February is that there is a movement towards this time period in March where we have these really amazing conjunctions happening. And I'm going to be talking about that more in March. But as February wraps up, we've really had an opportunity to envision the future, clear space for something new to come in, and release the past. So I'm going to move towards answering one of the questions that I was asked to answer in this Instagram Live. And if you have any questions that come up, please put them in the comments. As I announced at the beginning of this Instagram Live, if you'd like to ask a question for next month, for March's, please join my newsletter, link in bio. And if you'd also like to enter for a chance to win a free 15-minute reading at the next Instagram Live, you can have your name entered by signing up for my newsletter. So the question that I was asked to take a look at is, what do you think about the Pluto return that's happening in February? And this is the Pluto return of the United States. So most astrologers use what's known as the Sibley chart that was cast for the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And that chart of the United States, in that chart, Pluto was at 27 degrees of Capricorn. Pluto just entered 27 degrees of Capricorn a couple days ago. So there's a lot of activation of the United States chart. And this is the first time the United States has ever experienced its Pluto return. And in general, in the history of the world, it's a rare opportunity to really observe what happens when a country goes through its Pluto return. So part of answering this question involves getting to know the nature of Pluto. And Pluto is the planet that rules the underworld. It rules transformation. So Pluto is named after the god of the underworld in Roman mythology, known as Hades in Greek mythology. And so it's the planet that orientates us to everything that is beneath the surface. And in traditional astrology, Pluto rules everything that's valuable that's found in the ground. So there's a lot of meaning in that, you know, when we go beneath the surface, we find buried treasures that we can bring back up, and they have great value. Pluto rules over power and transformation through the experience of gathering power. So when we let go of the old, when we let go of what needs to die, what's not absolutely essential to our current reality, and feel the freedom of that, we are able to move into something new. So when a planet returns to itself, when you have your Saturn return, or even your birthday, which is your solar return, when the sun returns to the place it was when you were born, there's a sense of rejuvenation. There's a sense of new possibility, of something having the opportunity to begin again. There's also a kind of time of meeting up with yourself, of staring at yourself in the mirror, the time of confrontation. So what I'm talking about for anybody who just joined is the United States Pluto return, which is happening for the next 2 years, but it just started in February. And so when Pluto returns to itself, none of us as human beings will have that experience because Pluto has such a slow cycle. But in a chart of a country, when you watch what happens when a planet returns to itself, it's a time of reckoning. And on the positive side, this can be a time where we take a look at what it is the United States still holds that does have power, that does have meaning, that does have value. but it's also a time where we look at what needs to leave, what needs to be purged, what's no longer viable, what's no longer alive. And so there can be a great sense of releasing in order for what is vital and alive to continue. What's happening besides the United States Pluto return is the year of the tiger. And to me, that really is in alignment with this Pluto return experience. Because the last time we had the year of the water tiger was in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So these two happenings, sort of cosmic happenings, happening in this year seems pretty meaningful. It seems like we're headed into a time of really confronting the shadow of the United States. And there's a lot of gifts in that shadow, just like Pluto finds treasures underground and finds meaning and finds power. The United States too has the potential to find that. But there's also this problem of having to dig through the muck in order to get to that place. So there's probably going to be a lot of surprises. We've also got Uranus making some really active movement this year. But part of the sort of antidote or the medicine in navigating through this is to really be focusing in on what is true, what is essential, what is meaningful, what is alive for you as someone who may or may not be a citizen of the United States, but if you are, how do you find your own truth and reality and aliveness in that identity? But this is a collective transit, so we're likely to experience it in a much bigger way, but that, of course, always impacts the personal, the collective experience. So I want to, before I wrap up, that was the main question that I had to answer today, and I want to just offer it up if anybody else has an astrology question that they would like answered in the next few minutes. I'm happy to answer that for you, and this can be anything ranging from really beginning astrology, if you want me to give some more insights on, a particular planet or a sign or a house, I can do that. Or if you have a more advanced astrology question, I can answer that as well. And you just want to type it in the comment section, or you should have a place to enter questions on your screen. But if nobody has a question, I'm going to wrap up this session, and I'll be doing this again next month, probably at the beginning of March. I'll be announcing it on my Instagram. And if you're not already signed up to my Y Stars newsletter, please go to my link in the bio and sign up, and then I'll be sending out an announcement there and an opportunity to send me a question ahead of time to answer live. So thank you so much for everybody who joined. I'll be posting this on my Instagram stories for anybody who missed the beginning and wants to watch that. Okay. Oops. Okay. So, hi, Yesenia. Thanks for joining. This Retrograde, Yesenia asked, wonderful, intuitive and coach. She says, this Venus retrograde was rough. What, is that unusual? Okay. And so, a couple other questions. So let me answer Yesenia's question first. And that, what is this unusual? Okay, so good question. And it was rough. And part of it, I think, is because just that Venus in Capricorn joined by Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, it kind of added an extra oomph to it. And it also, of course, happened in winter, and which always kind of makes things a little heavier. And Capricorn is the sign of winter. So I think there was this theme around this Venus retrograde that was asking us to look at the winter of Venus theme. So what does it mean when there's restrictions in our love lives, or in our self-love, or in our self-appreciation? What does it mean when there's a lack of movement, when there's harshness. There's some of the Capricorn kind of retrograde themes. What does it mean when we have to do without? So when winter comes in the northern hemisphere, usually the leaves fall off the trees and everything's very stark, and there's this sense of really kind of getting back to the bones of the matter. And Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn, which rules the bones and the body. So having that kind of confrontation with what is really holding everything up in our relationship, that's pretty heavy duty. And of course, it always depends on what's happening in your natal chart. So Venus retrograde could have been activating some really tender points in your natal chart, so it may have felt especially heavy. But I think just having that Mercury retrograde on top of it made us much more aware of that intensity. And then I think, Jessica, I'm sorry, I so appreciate you joining. My wonderful friend Jessica Shepard, wonderful writer. And Jessica, I'm new to these Instagram lives, and I figured out how to go back to the questions. Okay, so Jessica said, you mentioned a very special day in early March, and can you talk a little bit about this, about how we can use this to make something magical? Okay, I know this special day you're talking about, and you're welcome, Yesenia. Okay, so the special day, it's actually, I think, and you know this because Jessica's a wonderful astrologer as well. So looking at that early March time where there's going to be almost all of the planets are going to be forming a series of conjunctions, but in different signs. So it seems like it's almost like a starburst of energy, of little clusters of kind of power of going outward. So how to use this to make something magical? I guess the first thing that comes to mind is that just thinking about that starburst kind of thing is like one of those seed bombs, so maybe, and you know what, it's actually not a stellium because they're all in separate signs. So if you look at it, it's like the sun and moon, or it's the new moon, I think, in Pisces. But then we've got and I can't remember all the planets right now, but they're all in like little clusters of separate signs. So when I think of a stellium, I think of like a group of planets in the same sign, or conjunct, technically conjunct. So it's a really interesting one. But back to the something magical, which I love. That's such a great question. I'm thinking about like charging up a seed bomb of and maybe charging it up with wishes for things that may not necessarily seem connected, but maybe are, and letting that out, planting that and letting that kind of burst out into the world. So that's just the first thing that comes to mind, but I'm sure there are lots of really creative, magical ideas that would be a great way to use this time period. So thank you all again for joining. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you next month. I'll probably do this talk a day or two before that special March day so that I can give a little bit more insight around that particular time period, because it's going to be a special one. Okay, thank you so much.